75% of the people in one shape or form don't really care about the company they work for. And 50% of the people are actually out there looking for another job, or at least open to another job. It's really difficult to get them involved in growth.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Internal communication influences the culture of an organization, and culture typically is the biggest driver of growth. But what exactly is the culture? Is it about hiring employees from diverse backgrounds? Is it about creating the culture buzz that most startups create? While every company might claim that they have the best culture, the culture that differentiates a fastest growing company from the rest is hard to build. In today's episode, we have our guest, Ben Baker, who starts describing how internal communication influences growth. He also touches on the cultural differences between VC-funded startups and traditional manufacturing and distribution lifestyle businesses. Finally, he discussed what industrial executives could do to enable the culture with internal communication tools and processes and how they can grow with a great culture. Let me introduce Ben to you. Ben Baker has been helping companies and the people within them understand, codify, and communicate their unique values to others for nearly a quarter of a century. Ben is the president of Your Brand Marketing, an employee engagement consultancy, author of Powerful Personal Brands, a hands-on guide to understanding yours, and Leading Beyond a Crisis, a conversation about what's next, and a host of iHeart and Spotify syndicated Your Living Brand Live show with more than 170 episodes behind him. Ben believes that if companies understand, live, and build cultures around their purpose, employees will engage, stay, and want to grow with the company. This takes great leadership, communication, and awareness of the brand. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Ben, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And just to kick things off, Ben, do you want to start with your personal story and what you are focusing on these days?
Oh, my personal story. Well, it all depends how far back you want to go. The story is long, it's arduous, but let me give you the highlights because nobody wants to hear my full life story.
We can hear. I don't know how long that is going to be, Ben.
It's only a 25-minute show, so let's stick to the highlights. I've been in sales for over 30 years and marketing and branding for the last 25. I started off 25 years ago in direct mail. Now, direct mail is just like manufacturing. For anybody that understands the print industry, really understands the manufacturing industry because it is all about process. It's all about making sure that you get stuff from A to B on time, on budget, and we make sure that the quality of the project is relatable throughout the entire project. So that's where I started. And it was all about how do we communicate value? How do we get the people that we're interested in talking to understand our value to them, why we're helping them, how we're helping them, how we're going to make their lives better. And for the last 25 years, that's really what I've done. Now it's evolved from print to promotional products to trade show development to really to branding. And what we do now is we help companies with internal communication because we find that that's really where the largest challenge of many organizations are. They have, full teams that sit there and do the marketing and the communication outside the company, but they're really, really bad at communicating purpose, vision, value inside the company and actually living it. So that's really in a nutshell where we came from, where we are today. because our goal is to help companies stop being commodities and start being brands worth loving.
Okay, so I want to dig deeper into a lot of those things that you mentioned as part of the intro. But before that, we have to ask one question that we do with every guest, okay? And that is going to be your perspective on growth. So, what does growth mean to you, Ben?
You know what? Growth is one of those really interesting things. I mean, I'm assuming most of your listeners are CEOs, CFOs, and because of that, growth really is a financial thing. It is really taking a look at where is the company day after day, month after month, year after year. You're sitting there looking at going, okay, have we increased the profits? But the question is it top line growth? Is it bottom line growth? Where are our margins? Where are our opportunities? Are we growing in terms of the different number of customers that we're doing? Are we getting more penetration per customer? There's lots of different ways to look at growth. And it really depends on what are the goals of the company that I'm dealing with, of how I discuss growth, because growth can mean different things to different people. I'm truly a believer of what's your penetration within a particular account. To me, that is growth because it's a lot cheaper to get more business out of the current customer than it is to do client acquisition. So the more you understand the customer, the more you can relate to the customer, the more trust you have with the customer, the more different types of projects you do with the customer, the more you cement that relationship, the deeper you are with that customer, and that leads to your overall growth and actually leads to greater profitability because you're not having to bid every single project.
Yeah, could not agree more with respect to capitalizing on existing relationship if there is a possibility. Then acquiring new customers are always going to be slightly more riskier. It's going to be harder and more expensive. So now when I look at this conversation, Ben, I'm actually trying to connect the dots. So let's say if we look at the internal communication, obviously I sort of understood the value, but how does internal communication affect the growth?
Internal communication affects growth is because if people don't understand where you came from, where you are, where you're going, and how they individually matter, employees are not going to engage. Now, right now, the statistics are the average employee, 75% of these employees are disengaged in one way, shape, or form. Everything from searching the internet for a new job on Indeed to just not caring about what the job that they're actually doing. And that's the statistics that you're seeing across the board. You can look it up on a Google search pretty much anywhere. 50% of people over the last year, now this is pre pandemic numbers, I'm not really sure what the numbers are today, were actually physically out there looking for another job at one time or another within a company. So when you're sitting there going, okay, 75% of the people in one shape or form don't really care about the company they work for, and 50% of the people are actually out there looking for another job or at least open to another job, it's really difficult to get them involved in growth. If we can communicate effectively, if we can get people to understand the purpose of the organization, how they matter to the organization, how what they individually do helps the organization grow and enable them and empower them to be better advocates for the brand, they're more willing to stay with the company longer, and therefore it enables the company to grow more effectively, more efficiently, and allows for greater communication and better better culture throughout the organization.
Yeah, and I could not agree more with that. But it's easier said than done, right? So when I look at the
Absolutely.
when I look at the market penetration, if I look at some of those startups, right, the talent that they attract for some reason, I mean, they are super passionate about what they do and they care for the company, right? They are very explicit in communicating on social media how much they love the brand. But I don't really see that in the traditional industrial manufacturing or the distribution companies. So, what are some of the factors, Ben, in your perspective? Why are these manufacturing or distribution companies not able to create the same culture, the same charisma that these startups are able to create?
Well, startup culture is a very different thing than anything else. Startup culture is based on the fact that you're part of the genesis. You were part of the team. You knew the owner personally. You were probably hired by the owner. You worked side by side. It wasn't an owner sitting in an office somewhere on the 13th floor and you're down on the third. You're side by side. You're working it as a single team, and there's a culture that gets built out of that. Now, as organizations grow, as you go from 10 to 50 to 100 to 500 to 1,000 to 10,000, that symbiotic relationship, that ability to have that across the desk communication lapses. And the larger the organization, the more challenging it is to have companies have effective communication because there's so many more people that have to be communicated to that you can't just have a huddle once a day. You have to have multiple huddles. And the question is, how effective is the person who's leading the huddle at communicating what the message and the drive is from the top? So it really comes down to, I look at it like a game of telephone. And when you start off the game of telephone when we were kids, somebody said something at the beginning of the line, and then it goes through 30 different people, and you ask the person at the very end of the line, what did the first person say? Well, dimes to donuts, you're never going to get the same message, and it may not even be close. So as organizations grow and they expand and they get larger, there's really has to be effective communication in order to get people to feel that they belong, that they're empowered, that they're trusted, that they're believed in, and the work that they do matters. So therefore, the organization moves together in one single direction, and that direction is taking care of the client.
Right, and that's how it should be, but it's not typically. Okay, so
No,
so size is definitely a factor. I mean, size. I completely agree that size is a factor. Once the organization becomes larger, then they have a different problem. But let's compare two organizations that are of similar size. So let's talk about some of those startups. So let's say a startup could have the 20 people, and some of these lifestyle manufacturing or distribution businesses. I don't know if you understand this term, but typically the lifestyle term is used for the businesses that are going to be slightly more family owned, that are going to be $25 million and less in revenue. This is slightly more financial or CFO term that they use for such businesses. And the reason why they do this is because typically these businesses are not growth. They don't necessarily have the growth mindset. So
right.
let's compare two of these businesses. One is lifestyle business, which is roughly $25 million in revenue, maybe 20, 30 employees, and then one startup, 20, 30. The amount of drive that both of these businesses are going to have is going to be very different. For a startup, these people are going to be super pumped, super passionate, super driven. They are going to be communicating about their brand on social media. But look at the lifestyle business. I don't know how passionate these guys are going to be. So, what is the difference in these two businesses, Ben?
Well, the difference between the startup culture is usually everybody who is part of the startup has a piece of the pie. It might be a small piece of the pie, but everybody's got, one or two or 50 or 100 shares of this company that hopefully someday they're going to convert because a lot of the people in the startup community, especially in the tech community and other, are all sitting there going, okay, we're going to create this business, we're going to create this technology, and somebody's going to buy it. And that's the thought process. The thought process is we're building this business to sell. And whether it's to go public or whether it's to be bought up by something larger or whether it's to get a large investment by a VC, whatever it is, they're looking to be able to have convertible shares. And because the individual people within the organization have hopefully convertible shares, there is an incentive for them, A, to stick around, and B, for them to work harder because there's that entrepreneurial spirit within it. Now, the typical lifestyle businesses, and I've been part of many of these organizations, you're an hourly worker. For the most part, for the most people, you're either an hourly worker or you're a salary worker. And whether you're working, you're 40 hours a week, you're 30 hours a week, you're 5 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever you're working, that's it. That's your compensation. Some organizations are smart enough to have quarterly or yearly bonuses that are an individual check that are based upon the profitability of the corporation and therefore have some type of stock sharing, private stock sharing that goes out to the employees so they have some type of incentive to be able to sit there and say, hey, here's my bonus for the extra work that I did. But typically a lot of organizations don't. They might get a Christmas dinner or there might be a golf tournament, but people don't see that as a tangible reward in the same respect as sitting there going, I have a minority ownership of this company. There's a piece of it that's mine. And therefore, if I do well and this company, goes from being a $10 million company to a $100 million company and we get sold, guess what? There's a payday at the end of the day. Now, a lot of these companies obviously don't survive and those shares are worth nothing. But the thought process is. It's just like turning the roulette wheel, or pulling the lever on a slot machine. Everybody's sitting there going, "Hey, there's a chance," and because there's a chance, there's far more incentive for them to be able to have that more engaged, more passionate, more entrepreneurial spirit within the individual worker of the company.
Okay, so financial compensation is one thing, and I don't know if every startup out there is actually doing the share arrangement, because that actually complicates the legal structure, to be honest. Okay, it used to
Absolutely,
be
it
the
does.
case. It used to be the case, but I don't know if that is always the case. In my opinion, I think that is actually driven by the greater purpose, and it goes back to your comment about the internal communication. In my opinion, the way they build their culture, it starts from hiring. They want to hire people who are going to be super passionate about, number one, their brand, number two, their startup, and number three, what they really do in their lives. So they are super passionate, super committed about their employees. And even if they don't have the shares or the financial compensation, as you mentioned, they are getting the freedom. And typically that freedom is not available probably with the lifestyle organizations. That's why, in my opinion, maybe the employees are not as committed. What will be your perspective on that?
Well, to take it from that point of view, that thing is that people want to grow, people want to learn, and people want to see growth.
Yeah.
It comes down to, are you hiring somebody within your company to be the receptionist, or are you hiring them as the receptionist with the thought process that, you know what, this person, if they do really well, maybe we could turn them into an inside salesperson, maybe we could turn them into an outside salesperson, maybe someday they're going to take over the finance department or the HR department or whatever, depending on what their passions are, and growing them within the company. And I think that if you hire people to just do a task, if you're hiring somebody just to run a machine, or if you're hiring somebody just to do a task, and your assumption is that we're just going to keep them at this machine or keep them doing it the same thing the rest of their life, people run out of passion pretty quickly. The typical thing is right now, the millennials and the Gen Zs are staying at corporations 18 to 36 months at the most. And the reason they are is because they don't see a path for growth. They're not learning. They don't feel that they're developing. They don't feel that they're getting more responsibility. They don't feel they're getting a title bump. They don't feel that they're getting all the things that they need to be better human beings and be better for themselves. And therefore, they go looking for another company that might be able to give them something different, to learn something new. Programmers, you see programmers do that all the time. They get bored programming whatever they're programming, and they might get paid the exact same amount at a different company, but if they get to do some different type of programming, a different language, a different skill set, whatever, it gives them incentive to go move somewhere else because they don't see a new project on the go. So companies, all companies need to sit there and say, why am I hiring these people, and how am I leading these people in order to get the best out of them in the long term? And a lot of it comes down to, are you listening to your people? Are you understanding what they're passionate about, what they want, what they need? Some people just want to stay in a particular job. I have a friend of mine, she is an executive assistant to the CEO. She used to be the vice president of marketing for the same organization.
Really?
She is way happier as the executive assistant to the CEO than she was as the VP of marketing.
That's a very interesting story. I'm looking to learn more about that. Why is she so happy?
She's happy because she's working in a smaller situation. She has her fingers in all the pies that she wants to do. She's involved in the charity. She's involved in a lot of the major decisions. She gets to take care of one executive and make sure that everything that he needs is done. And she is privy to stuff that a lot of people in the company never would be, based on the fact of where she sits in the organization. Where she was in the VP marketing position, it was all politics. It was constant pressure, and it actually caused her to have a heart attack. And what she realized is she was far better suited for this position as the executive assistant. Now she makes pretty good money as an executive assistant. Don't get her wrong, because she's really good at what she does. But her skill set was far better off that way. But unless she had the conversation with people at the senior level and say, look, this is not the right thing for me. I understand that I've gone as far as I can within this position. I'm not happy doing this anymore. I still want to stay within this corporation. I believe in the corporation. I believe in its mission, its vision, its values, its purpose. But I want to be doing something different. And there was the ability to have the conversations to explore new things. She would have left, and they would have lost a really, really good, passionate employee that had years and years of institutional knowledge that would have walked out the door with them. But as a company, realizing that our people need to be listened to, they need to be understood, and they need to be valued, and we need to understand what do these people need to be engaged long term. That's how we build people within the organization. That's how we get people to stay. That's how we get them to be more engaged and more purpose oriented.
So let's talk about this scenario. So let's say if I'm a CEO of a manufacturing organization, and one of the problems that I have noticed is I'm afraid of sharing knowledge with my employees. Right? Typically, that's how the lifestyle businesses are. That's how my mentors have recommended that this is how I should be operating. That's how majority of the lifestyle businesses operate. So all the admin and financial knowledge is going to be inside the office. All the operations knowledge is going to be in the operations department. The shipping knowledge is going to be probably in the shipping department. So we have these siloed, and they are there for a reason, because that's how manufacturing works. That's how distribution works. But when I look at the startups, obviously they have a very open culture. So I want to fix this. I want to have a similar culture in my organization as well. So Ben, let's say if you were to fix this organization, what will be your recommendation for me?
The first thing is to tell the CEO, CFO, COO to get over it, to realize that the organization will grow far better and far faster and far more profitably the more information they share. Now, there's certain information you're not going to share with people. I truly understand that there's certain pieces of information, proprietary information, critical information that doesn't need to be shared until it needs to be shared. But going and leaving everything in a vacuum and not getting your people involved and letting them know where you are, where you're going, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and listening and asking for their help, you're handcuffing yourself as an organization. You're limiting your growth. By sitting there going, I have to hold the cards tight to my chest and not tell anybody what's going on. If you have a heart attack, what happens? If you get hit by a car, what happens to your organization? If all of a sudden somebody leaves your organization that had mission critical information that only they knew about, what happens? We have this type of stuff happens every single day. We had a shipper receiver years ago that felt that they had to be the only person that knew what was going on in the shipping receiving department. They ended up getting sick and being out of the office for 2.5 months. We ended up hiring somebody else to basically do an audit of the entire department, rebuilding the structure, rebuilding all the process and procedures to make sure that we had a far more open understanding of what was going on. So therefore, this could never happen again. The amount of money that is lost every single year through siloing is staggering. It's millions and millions and billions of dollars across North America every single year through silos, by the left hand not understanding what the right hand's doing, and one department not understanding when I hand this off to these people, what happens to it. And we need to get out of that mentality. We need to get out of the mentality that there is information out there that, God forbid, I should share it with my people because they might run away. The problem is, what if they stay and they don't know what's going on? They can't help you. They can't be creative. They can't sit there and say, you know what? I know we're heading in this direction, but you know what? If we looked at this piece of equipment and we modified it and we moved it this part of the floor to another part of the floor, we could have some efficiency of scales. What do you think about trying this? And it could be something as simple as that, to be able to get efficiencies in a line, to be able to bring brand new product in without having to run a third shift. And it's a matter of, the more we can communicate as senior leadership, what's going well, what's not going well, where we're going, and what do we need to do to be able to be successful. and everybody understands that, everybody all of a sudden can start marching in step to be able to help that goal happen.
It's interesting the way you talk about these processes and the system as well. But typically, when we look at the state of the lifestyle businesses, they don't necessarily have any processes. The information is really kept with an employee who is going to be responsible for that function. If they are out, then obviously there are going to be challenges, but that's how majority of the lifestyle businesses are running. So what would be your recommendation in number one, removing those silos that we have with respect to these employees, and what will be your recommendation with respect to putting a system? And typically bringing these systems could be a major change for the organization that could actually disrupt the process. So how can we make sure that we are able to bring these change without disrupting the processes of the organization?
Well, the first thing I would say is why should we do this? And the big reason why should we have processes and procedures and codify? It's just, all it is doing is codifying what we're already doing and being able to sit there and go, okay, we're doing this. Wait a second, it's not working as well. Let's take a look at our procedures. Oh, wait a second, I see that step number 32 is being missed. Okay, fine, let's move forward. But the problem is, if we don't have policies, if we don't have procedures, if we don't have process, we're worth nothing when we go to sell our business. There's so many people with manufacturing businesses and others who come up and say, well, I want to sell my company in a year and a half. And they go to the business broker and they go to try to sell the company, and they get told that their business is worth 10 cents on the dollar what they think it is. And the reason for that is they don't have policies, they don't have procedures, they don't have contracts, they don't have, legal documents in place that make them attractive to a potential buyer. So all they have is a client list. Well, guess what? Your client list is worth about a nickel or maybe a quarter, because guess what? When you're gone and you don't have those personal relationships with those people, if there isn't the policies and procedures, nobody cares about your client list. Your equipment can be bought and sold. It's what makes your company valuable is the fact that we know that if you die or you leave or you whatever, the company is going to move on just fine when you're not there. And that's the big reason why you want the policies and procedures. Now, how do you do that? The big thing you need to do is you need to sit there and say, okay, let's take a look at what do we do on a daily basis on a departmental level, and how do we do it? And sometimes it comes in bringing in a process engineer or somebody who can just sit there and ask why. Why are you doing this? Why do you do it? And then what do you do? And then what do you do? And then what do you do? And be able to document it, and then have people that actually do that job on a daily basis look over the documents and say, is this really what you do? And they say, well, yeah, but we do this and then we do this. Okay. And what that enables you to do is speed up your hiring process, speed up your training process. It allows you to be able to cross train people. So if somebody can run this machine, they can run that machine and be able to do this job and do that job. And therefore, you can be able to be more flexible as an organization and be able to move forward more effectively. And a lot of it comes down not only just the process of that, but the process of how do we communicate with each other? How do we lead teams? Like right now, the big challenge is with people working from home. What policies and procedures do we have in place in any of your listeners' organizations about working from home? How are the leaders and the managers dealing with people leading from home? Are there set of expectations that are already there that everybody knows, everybody understands, everybody knows what they're expected to do on a daily basis? If there's not, then it leads to people sitting there going, well, I can do this or I can do this. So it's all open to interpretation. So maybe I'll do nothing. So if we can do that, it's not about carrot and stick. It's not about saying, well, you didn't do step number 32, so you're going to be fired. It's about having the procedures in place so everybody understands what needs to be done in order for things to be successful moving forward. And they understand how their particular job meshes with all the other departments to be able to allow for long-term success.
So one of the questions that I typically ask is how to go from point A to point B. And typically, when we have these siloed functions, it could be harder even for a CEO because they are not going to know everything. So let's say if I want to drive this culture of creating these processes and documentation, number one, who should be the driver and how can I get from point A to point B?
The first thing you need to do is decide why it's important to you as an organization, and you need to believe in it. You need to sit there and say, this is going to be painful. This is going to take time. This may cost money. This is not going to go well the first time we do it. We're going to make mistakes and we're going to have to move forward. But in the end, this is going to make us a more profitable organization. And if you can, that's the first place you need to start. Second of all, it comes down to culture first. You need to be able to get a culture and a purpose of an organization where people believe that the silos are being dismantled. Because once people understand the silos are being dismantled and that the organization flattens in terms of the curve and allows people to be able to communicate cross departmental, it allows for sharing, it allows for idea generation, it allows for people to be able to work together to build the processes and procedures together. But until you can break down those silos, until you can actually have buy-in from the top and actual leadership from the top that says, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is why we're doing it. This is what we want to achieve. We need to look at this as an organization and it's not just a finance issue. It's not an ops issue. It's not a sales issue. It's not a marketing issue. It's not a shipping issue. We need to be able to bring all of this together in order to serve the client. We need to serve our clients better because we need to be more flexible to make sure that we can be resilient and adaptable as business moves forward. And that means that we all need to work better together. And it's enabling that conversation and communication first, breaking down the silos second, and then developing the procedures that go along with it.
So I'm completely sold. I mean, I want to do it. I'm an executive and I definitely see the value in whatever you are recommending. But
Yeah,
I'm still not sure how to execute this. So I typically like to see 30, 60, 90-day plan, right?
right.
So let's say if I want to enable this, what should be my 30, 60, 90-day plan? And what are going to be my deliverables that either I can ask my team or I myself can deliver those to my team? So how would you structure your 30, 60, 90-day plan?
Okay, so the 30, 60, 90-day plan is once we have buy-in from the top and we have a budget and a purpose and a delivered that we decide that we're going to go through. And that could be 60 to 90 days right there, hammering that out with an executive board, depending if we have 5 people to deal with, 1 person to deal with, 12 people to deal with, and what that's going to be. That's an issue. The second thing that we do typically within organizations is we form communication groups within different organizations. And the first thing we do is we have a discussion with each organization says, what's the company about? What do you do? Who do you do it for? Who are your biggest customers? Why do they buy from you? What are the biggest challenges that you see? What are the biggest opportunities you see? And we do this by we'll have an ops group, a finance group, a marketing group, a legal group, whatever. And then what we do is we compare and contrast. And we sit there and say, are people on the same page? Do people believe that the company does the same thing? Do they believe that the clients are the same thing? Do they believe that the purpose is the same within the company? And typically the answer is no. So that's where we start working is to start working with companies and understanding and helping them build a brand story to be able to sit there and go, okay, this is who we are as an organization. This is what we do as an organization. This is who we do it for. This is why we do it. This is why our customers care about us. And there's a lot of research and development that can go along with that. From that point forward, it's about communicating it back to the various groups and getting buy-in from the groups to get them to understand what's the new direction and why the company is doing what they're doing and where they're going and how they matter individually. Now, this is something this could be 90 days, this could be 150 days, this could be 180 days, it could be a year depending on the size of the organization. As I said, it's not a process. It's not like flipping a switch on a new machine. It's dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, you need to understand the individuals and you need to be able to get the buy-in because if you don't, if you just try to ram a new set of beliefs, a new structure, a new purpose, a new vision down people's throats, the first thing they're going to do is rebel. And they're going to sit there and say, "Hey, wait a second here. This is new. I mean, I'm not buying into this. I'm either gone or, hey, whatever, this is just the flavor of the day. They're going to go back to the way things are. I'm just going to keep my head down and I'm not going to do anything. So the trick is to be able to form a line in the sand first. Where are you today? Understand where do you want to go and be able to bring the people along the road through various communication methods to be able to help them understand where you're going and why they matter and why they need to be part of this moving forward.
Right, amazing. That's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts by any chance?
You know what? I'd love to have a conversation with people. People can always reach me through my website. It's yourbrandmarketing.com. Happy to give people a free 30 minutes over Zoom, find out a little bit more about who they are, what their challenges are, and see if there's ways that we can support them.
Thanks, Ben. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Ben or his books, head over to yourbrandmarketing.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Randy Johnston from K2 Enterprises, who touches on why process documentation is an essential ingredient for efficient finance organization. Also, the interview with Wayne Seddon, who brings a unique perspective on why business processes are more important for growth than individual business systems. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.